It was a day like any other when everything in my life changed. I was just finishing up a regular workday when I received a call from Emma, my closest friend, and someone who had been with me through thick and thin for years. Her voice, usually calm and collected, carried an unusual tension that immediately grabbed my attention. "Hey, I don't want to alarm you, but you need to check something," she said. "You need to check Mia's phone." At first, I didn't understand. Mia, my wife of 4 years, was a good woman, or so I thought. She was supportive, kind, and seemingly loving. We had a routine. I worked long hours at the office, but Mia always made sure to check in with me, keeping the house together, handling everything I didn't have the time to. We had our problems, but didn't we all? I assumed the little things were just bumps in the road of any marriage. But Emma's words left a gnawing feeling in my gut. She didn't sound like herself. I didn't ask why I needed to check Mia's phone. There was no time for that. Instead, I simply said I would. Emma didn't say much else, and the call ended with an air of uncertainty that only deepened the anxiety creeping in. I arrived home later that evening to a house that felt eerily quiet. Mia had already finished dinner, but she seemed distant, almost as if something was off. Still, I tried to push my suspicions aside. Maybe she had just had a long day. We all did from time to time, didn't we? After some small talk, I found an opportunity to step into our bedroom. Mia's phone was charging on the nightstand next to her side of the bed, like it always was. My heart raced as I picked it up, my hand shaking slightly. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but I was desperate. I unlocked her phone without difficulty, as she never used a passcode, trusting me completely. At least, I thought she did. As I scrolled through her messages, my stomach sank. What I found was nothing short of a gut punch. There, in black and white, were messages that I never should have seen, texts between Mia and Jack, a man I had known for years. Jack was an old friend, someone I had invited to family events, someone I had trusted. But as I read more, I realized the truth in front of me was darker than I could have ever imagined. The conversations between Mia and Jack weren't just friendly exchanges. They were intimate, filled with flirtations, plans to meet up, and confessions of their secret affair. Mia had been cheating on me with Jack for over a year. I felt my entire world tilt on its axis. I could hardly breathe as the weight of the realization hit me. Every part of me screamed that I was wrong, that this couldn't possibly be true, but the evidence was there, undeniable. It was a slap in the face, a betrayal on every level. I couldn't think straight. I didn't even know how long I had been staring at the phone screen, reading the same messages over and over again. The anger slowly built within me, but I couldn't act on it. Not yet. I needed clarity. I needed time to process what was happening, even though everything in me wanted to confront her immediately. But I didn't. Instead, I calmly placed the phone back where it was and walked out of the room. Mia was sitting on the couch, her back to me, seemingly unaware of the storm I was now facing. I sat down beside her, trying to keep my voice steady, my emotions in check. "Mia, we need to talk," I said, my tone colder than I intended. She turned to look at me, her face neutral, almost too neutral. "What's going on? You seem off." "I know about you and Jack," I replied, my voice calm, but my heart was hammering in my chest. There was no point in sugarcoating it anymore. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked it, trying to play it cool. "What are you talking about?" "You've been seeing him for over a year," I said, feeling like the words were foreign in my mouth, like I couldn't believe I was actually saying them. "I saw the messages, Mia. I saw everything." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, her expression faltered, and I saw the guilt in her eyes. But before I could react, she broke down, starting to cry. It wasn't a soft, apologetic cry. It was desperate, almost frantic. She reached out to grab my arm, as though trying to explain herself, but I pulled away instinctively. I wasn't sure if I could bear to hear what she had to say, but I needed to. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "I swear, it just happened. I didn't want to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" I asked, my voice strained. "Why, Mia? I trusted you. I loved you. How could you do this to me?" She started to speak again, but her words became jumbled, incoherent. She tried to justify her actions, explaining how she had felt neglected, how Jack had given her the attention she needed, how things between us had been distant for a while. She kept saying that it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done, and no amount of excuses could change what had already happened. I listened to her, though it was like hearing someone else speak. It wasn't the Mia I had known, the woman I had loved. The person sitting in front of me, crying and pleading, was someone I didn't recognize. My heart was breaking, but I couldn't let her see it. I couldn't let her manipulate me with her tears. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal. Why Jack? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Why him? Of all people. Mia paused, her face twisting in shame. I don't know. I guess it just happened. I never planned it. It was stupid, and I regret it now. But you didn't stop it, I said, my voice hard. You didn't stop it even when you knew it was wrong. You let it go on for months. And now look where we are. There was a long silence between us. I could feel the weight of the conversation sinking in. Everything we had built together, everything I had trusted, felt like it was crumbling in front of me. But despite the anger, the hurt, and the sense of betrayal, I knew that I couldn't keep living a lie. I needed to get out, to make the decision that would set me free from this emotional prison. I can't do this anymore, I said quietly. I don't know who you are anymore. You've broken everything, Mia. I can't keep pretending that I don't see it. Her sobbing became more intense, but I remained still, trying to steady my own emotions. This wasn't easy, and it wasn't something I had planned for, but I knew deep down that it was the right choice. She had broken my trust in the worst possible way, and there was no going back from that. I'm leaving, I said, the words feeling final, like a declaration that marked the end of something I had never expected to end.
She didn't try to stop me.
Instead, she just collapsed on the couch, her tears soaking the fabric, as if it was the only place she could go. I walked out of the house that night with nothing but the certainty that my life, as I had known it, was over. The woman I loved had betrayed me, and I had to find a way to pick up the pieces and rebuild. Leaving that night was the hardest thing I had ever done. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going or what I was supposed to do next. My body moved on autopilot, the raw emotions coursing through me like a torrent that I couldn't control. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the feeling of being utterly lost. It was the realization that the life I had been building, the relationship I had invested so much of myself into, had all been a lie. I didn't even know where to go. I couldn't stay at the house. That was out of the question. The thought of being in the same space where Mia and Jack had plotted their affair made my skin crawl. I needed distance, space to think, to breathe. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring past as my thoughts raced. The loneliness was suffocating, and yet it felt oddly familiar. For the last year, I had been living in a shadow of a marriage, unaware of the true distance between Mia and me. And now, that shadow had grown into an all-encompassing darkness, swallowing every ounce of hope I had left. I couldn't bring myself to call anyone, not yet. Not even Emma, who had been the one to tip me off about the affair in the first place. Part of me wanted to scream into the phone about everything I had just uncovered, but another part of me felt like I needed to be alone with this, needed to process it on my own. I wasn't sure I could handle anyone's sympathy. The betrayal was so raw that it felt like anything anyone said could make it worse. I ended up driving to a nearby park, one I had visited many times in the past when I needed to clear my head. The familiar surroundings didn't bring the comfort I had hoped for. Instead, they only reminded me of the past, of everything I thought I had known. Sitting in the car, I let my hands rest on the steering wheel, gripping it with a force that left my knuckles white. I could still hear Mia's cries, her desperate apologies echoing in my ears. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just the affair itself that hurt, it was the lies. The fact that she had built an entirely different life without me, hiding it right under my nose. How many times had she come home from those secret meetings with Jack, kissing me with the same lips that had been all over him? I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't help it. My mind replayed the scene in the living room over and over again, like a broken record. The way she had cried, the way she had tried to justify it all. The words she said, her excuses, didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the irrevocable truth. She had chosen Jack over me, time and time again, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. Hours passed. The parking lot grew emptier as the night deepened, but I remained still, caught in the storm of my own mind. My phone sat on the passenger seat, vibrating intermittently. It was a message from Emma. I hadn't checked it yet, and part of me was afraid to. I didn't want to hear her pity, or her advice, or even her anger at Mia. What did it matter? The truth was already out there, and no one could take it back. No one could undo the damage. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I picked up the phone. I unlocked it with trembling hands and opened the message. It was short, but to the point. Are you okay? That was it. The simplicity of the message hit me harder than I expected. I knew Emma had been there for me when things were tough before, but this time, it felt different. The situation was far beyond anything we had dealt with before. She wasn't just asking out of routine concern, she wanted to know if I was surviving this, if I was even capable of holding myself together. The reality of it all weighed heavily on me as I typed a reply. Not really. The next message came through almost immediately. Do you want to talk about it? I hesitated. I didn't know if I wanted to talk about it, but I knew I needed to. I needed to say something. I needed to get the words out, even if I wasn't sure what those words would be. I needed to find a way to explain the churning chaos inside of me. I just don't know what to do right now. Everything feels broken. There was a long pause before Emma's next message came. I'm here for you. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just take it one step at a time. Her words were soothing in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't trying to fix it because there was no fixing it, but she was offering me the space to heal. I knew I wasn't alone in this moment, and maybe that was what I needed the most. Not answers, but the reassurance that I could get through this somehow. That night, I slept in the car, the engine off but the heater running. I didn't feel like going home, not to that house, not to that life. I didn't want to confront Mia, not yet. The weight of everything was too much to bear all at once. My mind raced as I lay in the dark, my thoughts drifting between anger, sorrow, and confusion. How had we gotten here? How had it all gone so terribly wrong? The morning light filtered through the windshield, casting a pale glow over the park. I woke up with a headache, groggy from the restless night. The reality of the situation was still there, still looming large. There was no escaping it. I had to face it. I finally gathered the courage to drive home, though I didn't know what to expect when I walked through the door. What would Mia be like? Would she be apologetic, angry, or maybe even indifferent? Part of me was still hoping that everything would somehow be a mistake, a misunderstanding, a momentary lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew better. When I walked into the house, the air was thick with tension. Mia was there, sitting on the couch where I had left her the night before, her face pale and drawn. She had clearly been crying all night. Her eyes were red, and she looked broken. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to erase what she had done, what she had taken from me. Can we talk? Mia asked in a voice that was barely above a whisper, her eyes meeting mine. I didn't answer at first. I wasn't sure if I could even speak without completely losing control. I hadn't even been sure I'd come back here today, but something in me, some small thread of my old self, told me I needed to do this. I needed to face her, face the woman who had torn my world apart. But no matter how much I wanted to scream, I remained silent. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak. What do you want to say, Mia? Her voice cracked as she began, her hands trembling in her lap. I'm so sorry, she said. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to go this far, I swear. It just happened. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had destroyed me. But something inside me knew there was no point in doing that. The damage was done, and no amount of shouting would bring back the trust we had lost. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said quietly. I don't know if I even want to. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she reached for me, but I pulled away. Please, she pleaded. I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed you. But I love you. I want to fix this. Please let me fix it. But it was too late. The words were hollow now, empty promises that could never undo the damage. I had already made up my mind. The love I had for her had been tainted beyond repair. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything. The lies, the deceit, the secret life she had built without me. There was no going back. I need time, I said, the words bitter in my mouth. I need space to figure out what I want. And I can't do that if you're here. For a moment, there was silence. Then Mia stood up, her shoulders slumped as she gathered what little strength she had left. I understand, she whispered. I'll leave. I'll give you the space you need. I didn't watch her go. I couldn't. The door closed behind her with a finality that left the house emptier than before. The silence was deafening. Weeks passed since Mia left. The silence in the house was suffocating at first, but as the days stretched on, I grew accustomed to it. The grief didn't subside, but it became manageable. I started to reclaim pieces of myself, the parts that Mia's betrayal had stolen. I was learning to stand on my own again, to remember what it felt like to exist without the weight of her lies bearing down on me. But even as I found some semblance of peace, Mia was never far from my thoughts. I'd hear from Emma occasionally, who told me Mia had moved into an apartment across town. She wasn't doing well. She'd been turning to alcohol to cope, and there were rumors of reckless behavior. It was strange, but part of me felt pity for her, even though I knew she had brought it all on herself. Then, one cold December evening, the phone rang. The caller ID read Emma, and I instinctively answered, expecting a casual check-in. But what Emma said sent a chill down my spine. Mia's gone, she said, her voice trembling. What do you mean gone? Where is she? I asked, my pulse quickening. She's dead, Jack. She died last night. It was an accident. She was driving drunk. A head-on collision with a truck on the highway. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened, my breath catching as the world seemed to blur around me. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to feel something. Anger, relief, maybe even a sense of justice, but all I felt was numbness. The anger I'd carried for weeks, the searing hurt, suddenly felt so distant. It was replaced by something I couldn't define. She was drunk. I managed to ask, my voice sounding foreign, detached. How? How could she let it get that far? I don't know, Emma replied. She had been spiraling, Jack. She was drinking more and more. I think she just gave up. She was lost. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence between us. I had known Mia was struggling, but hearing that she had lost herself so completely, it was too much to process. I wanted to be angry at her, wanted to scream at the universe for letting someone like her go unpunished for the destruction she had caused. But instead, I just felt emptiness. The days that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements, condolences from people who didn't truly know what Mia and I had been through. I went through the motions, attending the funeral, saying the things I was supposed to say, playing the part of the grieving ex-husband. But inside, I couldn't shake the sense of guilt that gnawed at me. Was it my fault that Mia had fallen so far? Could I have done something to save her? I knew the truth, even if I didn't want to admit it. Mia had made her choices. She had betrayed me, deceived me, and when the consequences caught up with her, she was already too lost to find her way back. The affair had broken her, just as it had broken me. But unlike me, Mia had never been able to heal. Instead, she crumbled under the weight of her own decisions. At the funeral, I stood by the side, watching as people whispered and murmured, their faces painted with the same sadness I had seen when we were still together. They mourned her, of course, because she had been someone to them, a friend, a sister, a daughter. But I could hardly bring myself to feel that loss. Mia had died in the same way she had lived her life after the affair, reckless, destructive, and utterly alone. The sound of the priest's words filled the air, but it was all a blur. I couldn't focus on the rituals, the prayers, or the solemnity of the moment. Instead, I thought about how it had all ended, how she had chosen Jack over me, and how that had led her down a path of self-destruction. I thought about how she had left me, but in the end, it was Mia who had been truly abandoned. She had abandoned herself long before the crash. As the ceremony came to a close, I found myself standing by her grave. The others had left, their footsteps fading into the distance, but I remained there, staring at the stone that marked her final resting place. Her name was etched into the cold marble, a simple inscription, Mia Williams, beloved friend, sister, and daughter. But for me, the truth was harder to face. She was none of those things to me anymore. She was the woman who had betrayed me, the one who had broken my heart, and ultimately, she had become a cautionary tale. A warning of what happens when you lose yourself in lies, when you choose selfishness over love, and when you let the consequences of your actions spiral beyond your control. I didn't know what to feel as I stood there. I felt no sorrow for her. I didn't even feel anger. I only felt a deep, crushing sense of finality. Mia had been a part of my life, and now she was gone.
Just like that.
Her choices had led her to this tragic end, and there was nothing left to do but to move forward. And so I did. I walked away from the grave, from the ghosts of the past that haunted me. The love I had once had for Mia was now nothing more than a faded memory, a story of a life I had built in the shadow of someone else's mistakes. The pain would linger for a while longer, I knew, but it would fade with time. It had to. As I left the cemetery and stepped into the cold winter air, I made a vow to myself. I would never let anyone take away my peace again. Mia's tragic end had come, but I still had a future to live, a future where I could choose my own path, one that was free from the darkness of her choices. And with that, I walked away, leaving the past behind me, forever. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.